I'm here to introduce you today, bring back one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. He grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. In 1946, he was stationed in the United States Air Force as one of the first occupation military to be in Japan after the end of the war. He taught himself Japanese, became so fluent in speaking, reading, and writing Japanese that most Japanese believe he's one of them. They think he was born over there. They can't believe that he's an American. They can't believe that there's any Americans who speak and read and write Japanese as well as he can. He eventually served years in the military, interrogating Japanese prisoners of war and things like that. Eventually opened his own English language school in Japan. Had lots of people working for him, including me, teaching English to Japanese people. He also became an expert dealing in antique guns and swords and armaments, and eventually became a very big shot in Japan. He's a legendary character over there. Everybody's heard of this person. Everybody knows about him. Even the prime minister, people like that, they know about him. Eventually, they didn't like the fact that he was taking over the whole country and dominating their industries and their empire, and so they threw him out of the country in 1995. So now he's back here in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, where he started off. Actually lives in Queens, but our studio is very near to where he originally lived. And we got up to the point where he was last week, where he was sent to Vietnam. This is a little episode that very few people know about. That in the early 1950s, when it was still French Indochina, and actually he knew a little French too. Eventually married a French woman. They sent him over to Vietnam to interrogate Japanese military that were being captured in Vietnam. Now, how did that work? What was Japanese military doing in Vietnam?
Well, you know, the war had been over, 1945. This was in the early 50s when they sent me over there to coordinate intelligence projects where we would get intelligence information from the Japanese who were coming out of the jungles of northern Vietnam. You have to understand this before America got involved in Vietnam, in the war over there. The French had the place, and I was studying French, and I knew enough French to get along with the French over there. The French army was still fighting, but they wanted me over there for my Japanese, because the Japanese prisoners that were still coming out of the jungles of North Vietnam, who either didn't know the war was over, or because they knew the war was over, they stayed there the rest of their lives. They didn't want to go back to Japan, and they had an incredibly important intelligence information about North Vietnam, and we had targets in North Vietnam for the B-47 to bomb, and some of these guys worked at these targets, and so I went over there to interrogate these people. We used a polygraph, which is a lie detector, and we used to have to tell these guys, you understand, these guys come out of the jungles with their torn uniforms, and these guys didn't have much to eat. They came out and they finally surrendered, and they would say, I asked them questions, and the guy that's operating the polygraph behind me, he said, make sure these people understand, they understand the question, and just tell them to answer yes or no only. Don't go into any detail. So I explained that to the Japanese guy, and once in a while the guy would veer off the main topic and start talking about something else. I tell him, 黙れこの野郎。言っただろ? はいかいえかどっちか返事しろと言ったじゃないですか。わかりました。And I tell him, I told you before, yes or no, don't go off into other subject. はい、わかりました, they say, and okay, I understand, sir. Don't sir me. I said, just answer the question, yes or no. And I'd ask him questions about the factory he worked in North Vietnam, and he was in charge of these things which are today targets of the Americans while we were fighting over there. Well, at that time, no, we weren't fighting there. We had a small, what do you want to call them, force of Americans over in Vietnam. We were teaching the French and the Vietnamese army how to use equipment that we gave them, the C-47s, the P-47s, fighter planes at that time, and other equipment we gave them, how to use the SCR-499. That was a big piece of radio equipment, and so I was part of that. But I'd go stay with them every time from Tokyo. I was stationed in Tokyo, but I'd go there every once in a while to interrogate some prisoners that we received a twix or a fax that said, we got a bunch of prisoners, send somebody down to interrogate these people, either in French or in Japanese.
So you went to Hanoi or Saigon?
No. I was always at Tan Son Nhut Today it's Tan Son Nhut Airport. At that time it was Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and the French had it. And the American, what do you call them? They call them MAG-V. MAG-V was Military Assistance Advisory Group Vietnam. These were American soldiers and airmen that were teaching the Vietnamese how to use equipment that we had given them to fight the North Vietnamese.
So you were there. You were on loan to the French to help them fight their war.
Like that. It was called TDY, temporary duty with the French army, and yeah. And I'd go back to Tokyo after this was over. I'd spend maybe a week or two at a time to interrogate these people. Some of these guys were high-ranking Japanese prisoners. The highest rank I ever got was a general, yeah. He was unknown until we got him, we captured him, and I interrogated this guy. And I even interrogated the guy, Bao. His name was Bao. The guy that I think he committed suicide or they killed him. He was in charge of he was President Bao. He was president that the Americans had set up. The French had set him up, really. And then later on, anyway, that's all. Let's get back to Japan.
A president of what?
Bao, B-A-O. He was president of South Vietnam.
I see.
The CIA had set him up because he was ran away from the communists. Communists, of course, the Russians and the Chinese were helping the communists in the north, and America and the French were helping the nationalists, the national Vietnamese people.
And you say you interrogated him, or you?
No. I met him.
You met him, I see.
Yeah.
And I also remember when President Johnson was going to make a trip to Japan. You were slated to be the personal translator for President Johnson.
No, it was President Eisenhower.
President Eisenhower.
It was President Eisenhower in 1960. He was President Eisenhower, and he was going around the world. And he was slated to be in Tokyo. His final trip was Tokyo, from Korea to Tokyo and back to America. And it was a very bad time in American-Russian relations, or international relations, because, you see, I was fluent, of course, in Japanese, and I was in the American embassy, and the ambassador at the time was from Douglas MacArthur III. He went to this guy, Allison. And then after him, it was another guy, Edwin O. Reischauer, who was the last ambassador I know of before I left Japan. What happened was that, see, he landed in Korea, and in Korea his next trip was Tokyo, and we had orders they told him don't come to Tokyo because the Japanese communists were going crazy. They were overturning cars in the streets. They had set fire to the American embassy, well, the annex building where I was working, and they said don't come. And so my boss, Colonel Emmons, the guy you saw in that picture before, he was a lieutenant in that picture. He was a colonel when I worked for him, later on a general. He was one of the Doolittle Raiders, but he said, come with me. And he said, we went down to the room on the fourth floor of the building near our office, and we got hold of an Army 45 strapped to my waist. I was in civilian clothes, of course, and we worked in civilian clothes in the embassy, and had a coat over it. And then he had a riot gun, 1917 riot gun in his pants. He could barely walk. And we went down the streets, got in the car, went up to the Chancery. The Chancery is the main building of the embassy, and at that time was Mrs. MacArthur. She was married to the nephew of Doug, the commanding general over there, MacArthur. And she was drunk as a skunk. She had a little Yorkshire Terrier, was it, in her arm. She says, oh, hello, Sergeant, how are you? And I said, I'm fine, sir. You sit over there, she said. She's barking orders. And the Japanese had ringed the embassy, Japanese socialists and communists, and they were getting ready to set fire to that. They had bamboo poles, and they were getting ready to poke out the windows. But then finally they were able to, everything subsided, and the ambassador and the Japanese, at that time, I forgot who was the Japanese premier, and they said, okay, everything settled down, and they went into talks and everything, and they got everything they wanted. But that was a very close call in those days for the Americans that were stationed in Japan. You understand that Japan at that time, the occupation was over, and we were just what they called the Japanese had the self-defense forces, and we were there as a security force, they called us at that time. No more occupation force. But this happened then. This was 1959, 1960, 61, 62. I was there. Getting back to President Eisenhower, they called off his trip, and he went back to America from Korea. And at that time, what happened was that this guy, Gary Powers, who was in the U-2 flight, right, and he was shot down by a missile that American intelligence didn't even know they had. The SA-3 was a high-flying missile, went up. It was above all other missiles. They shot him down. And when they shot him down, he was taken prisoner. And he was supposed to take this poison pill here, take it like that, and die, but he didn't do it. He reneged on his promise, his oath in the CIA.
Are you angry at him because he didn't kill himself?
Well, he was a traitor, let's put it like that, because I was intelligent. If I had to do it, I would have taken the pill. Because
you would have taken the pill.
But I didn't get to that part. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you a very interesting story. After I retired from the Air Force, I went to CIA, passed all the tests. I was going to work for CIA. I was going to work for them until they told me in McLean, Virginia, they said, now, we're going to transfer you eventually from, right now I was in interrogations, I was in translations, because I was fluent in Japanese and some other languages. They said eventually we're going to groom you for a job in the black section. They call it the black section and the white section. The white section was all administrative, open-air, overt collection of intelligence on all countries of the world. But later on they wanted to transfer me to the black section, which was covert intelligence. That meant you had to kill people. And they were going to train you how to kill people, And I said, wait a minute. No, I don't want to get involved in killing people. And I quit right then and there. No, that's a true story. Eventually, you're going to wind up killing certain people we target in Japan and in Korea if we send you there. You kill people like how? He said, well, we'll tell you how to do that. And later on, you'll learn all that. And he said, what about me? Well, you have to commit suicide, reverse. But Gary Powers didn't do that. They captured him, they shut him down. And what they did was, at the time, we had this guy Sokolov, who was an arch Russian spy. We had him in jail. And the federal government had him, I think it was at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And they didn't know what to do with the guy, keep him forever or execute him. At that time, they said, we'll trade you Gary Powers for our man in your prison over there, Sokolov. And we agreed to that, and they traded him. Gary Powers was released. He got 10 years of life over in Russia. And 10 years of life in Russia meant it was a death sentence. He never got out alive. But they traded him for this guy Sokolov, and that was the end of that chapter.
And tell us more about the 62 Japanese virgins.
We keep going back to 62. Okay, the first one was, as I told you, 1949. She was a virgin, and I was not a virgin because between 1946 and 1949, I think I had slept with, they used to call them pom-pom girls, dirty occupation, and you give them cigarettes or a pack of cigarettes, and you had a girl for a weekend. And this is all very new to me too, you know. And so I caught a dose of clap. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah,
dose of clap 3 times. The first time.
We're all adults here, so we know what that is. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so after a while, I decided to get serious with a Japanese girl. I had some serious girlfriends, and there was a nice brief interlude in my life in Japan. And so everything went fine. Then I lost, after I broke up with her, came to the States, went back. Every time I re-enlisted, they sent me back to Japan. So I was there 10 years with the military, during the occupation, later on the security forces. And what happened was that, talking about 62 virgins, I, after a while, just concentrated on that because my first Japanese wife died. She wasn't a virgin. And after that, I started going to a lot of different Japanese girls, but I didn't care about all these girls that had already slept with everybody's brother. I wanted an innocent girl, and every time I'd be teaching them English, they were 16, 17. As soon as they turned 18, I did what I had to do, and that's about the time I met you, by the way.
Oh, I see. That's where I got into this.
That's when you, made your debut in my life in Japan. And you worked for me, if you remember, as a teacher.
Right.
You couldn't speak English much. I was training you, but but you were teaching English. No, that's a joke, but some of that is true now. And so, that's when we met Tony. Oh, a chapter I prefer to forget. But getting back to girls, prod me or tell me what to say.
Well, no, wait. You just said your first Japanese wife died. You're not talking about the one that...
Nami's mother.
Oh, yeah, okay.
She committed suicide. That's a long story. But you mentioned a French wife, which was a brief interlude in my life, too.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right.
That was in America. But after we divorced, I went back to Japan. Because she didn't like Japan, she didn't want to go over there. She was stationed in Japan with me in the embassy, but she didn't want. When I retired, she didn't want to come back over there. I said, "No, let's go to Japan and live." She said, "No." She said, "Let's go to France and live." No, I don't want to live in France. I don't like the French. The French don't like me. Let's go to Japan. She said, "No." So I went over there by myself.
So now you're working on you're working on your third Japanese wife now.
No, I'm living with my second Japanese wife. As far as I'm concerned, that's the end. I don't want to have any more.
You're not going to marry more Japanese wives?
No, not if I can help it.
Oh, well,
No, I don't want to marry. I'm fine. I'm very happy here. She's here. I wish we could somehow put this on the picture. She's fine. She and my dog Cookie are the really.
Oh, you became a grandfather yesterday?
My second time I became a grandfather
okay.
by Naomi. Naomi is a product of my first Japanese wife. She's Eurasian, half Japanese, half Caucasian, and she had her first baby yesterday. So I became a grandfather again.
Was it a boy or a girl?
It was a girl, but I haven't visited yet. I'm going to visit today after this session.
And are you going to get Japanese citizenship for your new granddaughter?
No, I don't think so. It depends on her mother. Her mother's half Japanese, but she has both citizenship. She has Japanese citizenship and American citizenship. Naomi, that is, who's 33 years old right now, 32 rather.
You know, it's very rare to find a person who is totally 100% fluent in 2 languages, but Naomi really is.
Naomi, yeah, but she's forgetting a lot of her Japanese because she's been back here now, about 15 years? But she grew up, she was born and raised in Japan. She grew up in Japan. I sent her to the American school in Japan, ASIJ, and that cost $1,300,000 yen. At that time was around $10,000 a semester. Semester was over there was 9 months, 3 months vacation. Anyway, so I paid for her education, and she grew up there. And she went to ASIJ. Is very famous for several people you probably don't know. You may know them because Joan Fontaine, the actress who died many years ago, and her sister was Gloria de Havilland. They were born and raised in Japan, missionary parents, and they went to that school too, ASIJ. Oh, and then there was Edwin O. Reichauer, who was the ambassador later on in Japan. He was born and raised in Japan. He went to that school. I saw the yearbooks of all these people. And Naomi went there until she was 15. Then they threw her out of school because she got in bed with some of the other kids there, and they were all smoking. They were never got on pot, but they were drinking. She was caught drinking beer in the bathroom and cutting classes and shit like this, and forget about it. It's a long story. That chapter I prefer to forget about. But then I sent her back to Japan. She stayed with my mother when my mother was still alive, out in Long Island. And she began to forget Japanese. But she's still fluent. I mean, as far as everyday conversational Japanese goes. But she knew about 300 or 400 characters. She forgot most of them, she said. But me, I used to know more than 4,000 characters. I used to translate every day. And right now, I can still read and write read the Japanese when I see them. But I'm beginning to forget how to write some of these characters. But other than that, I can still translate now.
Would you like to go back to Japan if they let you back in the country?
Well, you skipped the most important part of this story. Why was I thrown out of Japan?
Yeah, why were you thrown out of Japan?
It's the final chapter of my life in Japan. You wouldn't believe it. Nobody would believe this story. Why was I thrown out of Japan? You remember I had, among the three businesses I had, a large school, had over 3,000 students. I had also a bookshop. But that's not so important. I had also what? An antique weapons shop. I had armor, I had Japanese armor, European armor. I had guns, pistols, swords, all that I was selling. It was one of the biggest things in my life in Japan. I had people call me from the southern island of Japan, Honshu, or later on Okinawa, northern tip of Hokkaido. Mr. Sacripante, you still have that gun in the shop that's in the catalog? I'm looking at the picture of the catalog. I want number 25. No, we sold it a long time ago. I bought that for maybe $600, sold for, at the time, about 2 million yen, about $20,000. But I paid tax on all that.
But isn't that how you became a millionaire?
That's one of the reasons how I became a millionaire. 2 jobs kept me very busy. One was the school. I used to work from 9 in the morning to 9 at night. And the shop I had, the 2 shops I had, I used to go there on Saturdays and Sundays when I didn't work at the school, and I talked to my customers who were some of the biggest, most famous people in Japan. I'd mention those names now, except that who would know them here in America? Oh, one of the people would know probably is Toshiro Mifune, a very famous actor. He played in all the samurai pictures and played in American pictures too. He was one of my best customers. He died about 10 years ago. But anyway, yeah. And then why did I get thrown out of Japan? Well, the Japanese, one day my clerk called me from the shop. He said, Shacho, taiheen da. Kyou no shimbun mimashita ka? Did you see today's paper? I said, no, I didn't. Shacho means Mr. President. I said, no, why I'm very busy here in the office. What are you calling about? He says, you got to come over right away. The police want to talk to you. The police, nani, keisatsu mata urusai at all. They want to talk to me again. I went over and tell them, what do you guys want? Listen here. You got all these guns on the damn wall over there. These real guns? Well, your people know me. I mean, I've been there 5 years. Of course they're real guns. And, well, where are the registration for these guns? Well, they're in the drawer. Put them on the damn guns. Yak, yak, yak. And this went on back and forth. They used to harass me all the time, the Japanese police. But one day, it was in the papers. Did you see this paper? They told me, Shacho, today's paper, your picture's in the paper. Did you see it? No, I haven't looked at Japanese papers in years. Why? Well, you're in the papers. Come on over. The police want to talk to you. I went over there, and the police said, these are real guns. I said, yeah, okay, don't import any more real guns. Why not? That's my business here. I mean, yeah, well, from tomorrow on, in the paper it said in Japanese, the caption of the picture said, Koshiki Juho wa mou osoroshi kyogi de arimasu. 3月、4月1日からもうここに入らなくなっちゃうから、その登録証明書をもう発行しないから。But they didn't tell me this. This was in the paper. I had to read. I don't read the Japanese papers. Too much trouble. But what it said, a loose translation was from April 1st, Western antique weapons will not allowed to come into Japan anymore. You can't import them anymore. And you will not be registered anymore. Will not issue registration for those guns anymore. Don't import anymore. That's what they're telling me. The picture was in the paper. But why didn't you tell me this before that? The date of that newspaper, guess what it was? It was March 30th. What's the last day of March? 30th or 31st? March 30th, I think, is the last day of the paper. And from April 1st, the next day, with no previous warning to me, they said you can't import any more antique weapons into Japan. That's what they said, except Japanese swords. Now, Japanese swords, those are considered cultural objects. Although they're very dangerous weapons, you can shave with them. They're so dangerous, you can cut heads off if you got enough strength. 5, 6 people's heads. In fact, that's how they used to test the sword when they made them. They used to take prisoners, condemned prisoners, Japanese, hundreds of years ago. They line them up, and they whack their heads off. If you have enough strength in your hand, you take that sword, you whack off at least 3 people's heads off. And on the sword, they said, today, 3 people had their heads cut off with this sword. And that sword today is worth $100,000, $200,000. But they're in Japan, these rare swords, in museums. But that's what happened. They said, you can't import any more guns, they said. Well, me, I had a lot of guns. They said, well, the ones that are registered already, you keep them. They're yours. Close the shop, they said. I closed the shop. I mean, would that happen in Japan, in America? It couldn't happen in America. That's your what is it, civil rights?
Well, they passed the New York Sullivan Law.
That's this guy Sullivan. People used to walk around with guns in there, but that was Tammany Hall. That's when people used to kill each other on the streets here. When Teddy Roosevelt was the chief of commissioner of police, this guy Sullivan passed a law. He was what do you call it, congressman of New York, like Schumer is today. And he said, okay, pass along, because everybody's walking around with guns. And if you got caught with a gun, it was just an excuse to throw the people in jail. Otherwise, they had no other evidence on the guy. If the guy caught a guy with a gun, got 5 years in jail.
Well, I realize in these modern times you don't kill people on the streets anymore, but
They don't? Are you kidding? Thanks to Giuliani, I don't.
By the way, have you been back to your old home in Bushwick, Brooklyn lately?
Last year, I went to visit with my brother who came up from Florida. He's retired in Florida. The other one's retired in Lindenhurst, Long Island, I think it is. We came up, and the three of us rode around in the car and looked at our old neighborhoods. See, you mentioned Taft Place, which was one of our old neighborhoods. Another one was Kosciuszko Street and Kent Avenue. And over there had the stable. I used to go to the stables every day after school. I used to study in school next to the horse. I like that smell of horse shit, you know. And but anyway, yeah, I went there to answer your question, and we looked around, and then we went to this one place, and my brother stood in the car, and I said, I got out, and she let me look at the building. When I was small, this building looked like it was a skyscraper. Now it's only a 4-story building next to the factory where my mother used to work. Obama used to call Kaiser Silk Factory. And I looked at it, and there's a couple of guys, Latinos and a couple of blacks on the student. They said, hey, what you want, boy? That's what they said to me. What do I want? I'm looking at this building. I used to live here 70 years ago, you know, before your father was born, I'm talking about. I used to live in this building. So you came in and see what was you're slumming around. No, I'm not slumming. I'm looking at my old neighborhood. And I looked at 211 Taft Place. I remember this place, and there was a DeKalb trolley. Well, in the old days, now it's a bus line. And over here was Willoughby. They used to have the orphanage. I used to go to the orphanage. I was almost killed there one day because down from the orphanage there was a lumber yard, and we used to play tag around the lumber yard. I was around 6 or 7 years old. And one day, I was running after this guy because I wanted to tag him, and I heard this big noise, and here comes crashing down about 10 tons of lumber, and just missed me and killed a guy, my buddy that was chasing me. That's a true story.
Really?
Yeah. All that lumber came piling down. And from then on, of course, they had signs. We climbed over the fence. You weren't supposed to be in that lumber yard. We climbed over the fence.
Now, let's get back to the main thing. How did they kick you out of Japan? Why did they kick you out of Japan?
Getting back to that, the saddest chapter, and the final chapter of my life in Japan was when they kicked me out. They said that I had imported a gun, which I wasn't supposed to, which was not true. The gun was a perfect gun to be imported, but see, they changed the rules over there all the time without notifying me. They said, this particular gun cannot come to Japan anymore. This is not the one that I told you about. It was in the papers. There was another one. And this was, in fact, the gun was allowed in Japan because it had Japanese writing on it. Japanese writing, why did it have Japanese? Well, it's a long story, but. So anyway, I imported that gun, and they said, okay, they came to my house, and with a search warrant. This was about the 10th time because I was, you know, my nickname in Japan was Shino Shonin. With the police, Shino Shonin means the merchant of death, because I dealt in guns. I was the only shop in Japan I had. And then it said, the customs people called me, Shino Shonin, the police called me merchant of death. And the other one was, what was the other one? Koroshia, Mr. Killer. They called me Koroshia in Japanese means killer. And so I used to laugh all over in the bank, and they'd call me that, and I'd say, fuck you, I used to tell them. But we can't say that on television? Okay. No, but that's a true story. Like, I'd go to the police would come to their offices, and they say, okay, we'll give you a house search. Give me a house search. And I'd say, I go down and talk to the chief of police, and they say to me, killer, Kosha, what do you do this time? What do you do this time? I said, I don't know. They want me to talk to you. And they talk, we got this trouble here. Yeah. Okay, that was the end of that. Getting back to your question, why they threw me out of Japan, I had imported this gun, which was perfectly legal, but they refused to issue me a registration for that. And I said, why? Because this gun from yesterday on is no more legal in Japan. I said, but it's got Japanese writing on it. We don't care. We changed the law. They changed the law just like that, verbally, not through an act of Congress. And so they changed the law, and they said, okay, we're arresting you. They arrested me. That's a true story. They came over, and they said, okay, don't touch anything. And 10 people went through all my house, under the bed, this and that, the chandeliers. They checked everything, blah, 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 blah. And they found a couple other guns, which were registered. And they said, okay, they took me away, and they put me in the Poke there. This was 2.5 months in the Poke in Fusa. Fusa's a little village near the base, air base. And it's outside of Tokyo, this was. And they wanted me to confess to something I didn't do. They said, okay, now you smuggled this gun in Japan. I did not smuggle this gun in Japan. They said, okay. You know what they said in Japanese? Omae wa ne, jibun ga erasou ni omotteるかもしれないけど, you think you're a big man in this country. That's what they said to me. They said, but you ain't shit. Omae wa koroshiya da kara. You're a killer, as far as we're concerned. Now, you imported this gun, which was illegal. Fuho yunyu there. Da kara taihou shita wake. This is mitsu yunyu. Mitsu yunyu in Japanese means, not illegal, it means, what do you call it, smuggle. No, I didn't smuggle this gun. On the package it said, contains a Colt revolver. This is for customs declaration form. It's called a Zeikan Shomeisho. Zeikan Shinkoku Shomeisho. It means customs declaration form. It said, contains a Colt revolver. It said, and so the police, so what's wrong with that? How did I smuggle this gun in the country? So I wouldn't confess to what they said. See, that's what they had me for, smuggling. So I wouldn't confess. And you know what they told me in Japanese? Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
They said, omae wa ne, if you don't confess, you're not leaving this place. That's what they told me. Talk about habeas corpus and civil rights violation, and they threw me out of the country. This happened 5 months later, because I was looking at 5 years in jail.
This
trumped up charge
what
list.
year, when did this happen exactly?
This is 1995.
I see.
And so I couldn't go home and pack a suitcase from the court building. I got 3 years suspended for 5 years, and for something I didn't do. I didn't smuggle. That was anyway. That's a long story. But so finally, I got to admit. I said, "Well, it was illegal importation. We got to change to that. Otherwise, because my Japanese wife came over from New York. She was the head of one of the Japanese newspapers here, making a very good salary. She quit her job, did everything. Come over to Japan and help me, along with Naomi, the one who just had a baby yesterday. They came over there and they helped me because I had no one. Oh, she got me a lawyer, and the lawyer told me the same thing. After 5 months, he said, "You know, if you don't commit to the charge, they're not going to let you out of here. You're going to get 3 years." But I didn't do that. What they're saying. Well, you got to figure out how you're going to do this because. So finally I said, look, I'll tell you what I'll do. They came to investigate me again. That day, the customs people and the Japanese chief of police came and they said, okay, now, if you don't meet this charge in 1990, we'll tell you that, okay? So what are you going to say? I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let's not say mitsuyunyu, because that means, what do you call it, smuggling. Let's say, 私はね、その古式情報というのを輸入したのは、それが、密輸入じゃなくて不法輸入。illegal importation. And they looked at each other and said, okay, we reached a compromise. Otherwise, I would never have done that. Okay, the same as smuggling, but it wasn't smuggling. There's a difference. Illegal importation, they could just slap on the wrist and they read the riot act and send you, no problem. But smuggling, you go to jail for that. They even had drug charges there, but there were no drugs. They couldn't prove it. So they got me out, and I wanted to go back home and pack a suitcase. I was getting ready to go home. My son was still over there because he had my business. I put him in charge of the business. I was going home. They said, no, you can't go home. You can't go home. And guess what? See, in Japan, they all wear the same uniform, whether it's police, customs, or whatever they are. It just says up here. So it said immigration. They took me by the arm. I said, wait a minute. I just got, I apologize to the Japanese people, the Japanese court. This was in the court building. The judge, 3 judges there. One guy was sleeping, the other guy was catching flies, and one in the middle said, okay, 3 years suspended for 5 years. And so I went back to the back to get my wife, and my son was over there, and everybody's crying. I'm crying. I was lucky because I could have gotten 3 years. And so I said, let's go home. Here comes these 2 guys in uniform. It says immigration right here. They got the same uniforms as the police and everybody else over there.
Okay, now
we're going to continue. Me.
Yeah, okay.
And they deported me.
Okay, so you didn't know this was going to happen. Okay, we're going to continue the story, but our time is up now. I think our time is up, and we'll come back next week with more of this fascinating story about the Brooklyn boy who made bad in Japan.
Okay, and this is the 3rd chapter, or are we finished?
No, we got one more chapter.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay, very good. I wish we could show some pictures here. Look at this. I used to be such a handsome stud, huh? Now I'm so ugly and old. Look at this.